The laughter wasn't the worst part. It was the rhythm of it, synchronized, rehearsed, and echoing off the lockers like a physical blow. Liam Thorne, the boy who had spent 3 weeks writing me notes and buying me lavender lattes, was doubled over. He wasn't laughing with me. He was laughing at the very concept of me. "Look at her face," Liam wheezed, pointing a finger at my burning cheeks. "She actually thought I'd take her to the spring formal. I mean, come on. It was a dare, Elara. A joke." My heart didn't break. It shattered into 1,000 jagged glass shards that sliced through my pride. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My throat was too tight for salt water to pass through. I just stood there, clutching my chemistry textbook, while the crowd of St. Jude's Academy watched the most humiliated girl in school. A prank. I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "The ultimate one," Liam smirked, straightening his varsity jacket. The warmth I thought I'd seen in his eyes for 21 days was gone, replaced by a cold, shallow vanity. "Don't take it personally. It was just a bet to see if I could make the resident ice queen melt. Turns out, you're actually pretty easy." The hallway blurred. I turned and ran, not toward the exit, but toward the old West Wing, the place where the shadows were long and the people were few. I crashed into something solid, something that smelled like expensive sandalwood and old books. "Watch it," a low, melodic voice drawled. I looked up, my vision clearing just enough to see the one person I should have avoided, Julian Vane. If Liam Thorne was the golden boy of St. Jude's, Julian Vane was its eclipse. He was Liam's polar opposite, his rival in every academic and athletic category, and the only person Liam truly feared. Julian was sharp lines, dark silk, and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. "I'm sorry," I choked out, trying to sidestep him. Julian's hand shot out, gripping my elbow. It wasn't rough, but it was firm. He looked past me, his gray eyes narrowing as he saw Liam and his pack rounding the corner, still cheering over their victory. Julian looked back at me. He saw the smudge of mascara, the trembling lip, and the way I was trying to disappear into my own skin. "Thorne did this?" Julian asked. It wasn't a question of curiosity. It was a cold calculation. "It doesn't matter," I said, wiping my eyes aggressively. "It matters to me," Julian murmured, his gaze flicking to Liam, who had stopped dead in his tracks 10 feet away. The smug grin slid off Liam's face the moment he saw Julian's hand on my arm. In that second, a wicked, desperate thought ignited in my mind. Liam wanted a prank. I'd give him a goddamn performance. I stepped closer into Julian's space, feeling the heat radiating off him. "Julian," I said, my voice loud enough to carry down the hall. "About that date you asked for, I've changed my mind. I'm free Friday." The silence that followed was heavy. I felt Julian stiffen, his entire body going rigid. I braced myself for him to laugh, to push me away, to tell me I was pathetic. Instead, his grip on my arm softened, and his fingers slid down to interlace with mine. He pulled me flush against his side, his thumb grazing the back of my hand. "Good," Julian said, his voice dropping into a possessive growl that sent shivers down my spine. He looked directly at Liam, whose face was rapidly turning a shade of mottled purple, and offered a slow, predatory smile. "Because I don't like to be kept waiting." Liam took a step forward, his fists clenching. "What the hell is this, Elara? You can't be serious." "Him." Julian didn't even give him the satisfaction of a verbal reply. He just leaned down, his breath hot against my ear, and whispered, "Walk with me, unless you want to stay here and let them finish the joke." I didn't look back. I walked away with the devil on my arm, leaving the golden boy to drown in his own silence. The silence of the West Wing was a vacuum, swallowing the distant echoes of Liam's protests. We didn't stop until we reached the courtyard, a manicured square of stone and ivy that felt leagues away from the locker room cruelty of 5 minutes ago. Julian let go of my hand the second we were under the shade of the grand oak. The sudden loss of warmth was startling, a cold reminder that this wasn't a fairy tale. It was a tactical maneuver. I tucked a stray hair behind my ear, my heart still hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Thank you for playing along." Julian leaned back against the tree trunk, crossing his arms. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling his sharp features. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a predator who had just been handed a very interesting piece of bait. I wasn't playing, Elara, he said, his voice smooth and dangerous. I don't do pretend. If we walk into that formal together on Friday, people will talk. Liam will lose his mind. And you'll be the girl who traded a spark plug for a supernova. I winced at the bluntness. I just wanted to wipe that smirk off his face. You did more than that. You wounded his ego in front of his court. Men like Liam Thorne don't handle public humiliation well, Julian said, his gray eyes tracking a leaf as it drifted to the ground. He thinks he owns this school. He thinks he owns you because he managed to trick you for a few weeks. He doesn't own me, I snapped. I know that, but he needs to see it. Julian stepped closer, invading my personal space again. He was a head taller than me, and up close, the scent of sandalwood was intoxicating. He's been trying to get under my skin since freshman year, stealing my lab notes, trying to outbid my father's foundations, sabotaging my rowing times. Using you as a prank was his way of proving he's the alpha of St. Jude's. I felt a fresh wave of nausea. I was just a pawn in your rivalry. To him, yes. To me. Julian reached out, his long fingers tilting my chin up so I had to meet his gaze. To me, you're the first person in this building who has actually made him look small. A thrill of something dark and exhilarating sparked in my chest. What do you want, Julian? You didn't help me out of the goodness of your heart. Honesty. I like that. He smirked, and for a second, he looked almost human. I want to see him break. I want to see him realize that the joke he played just cost him the only thing he actually wanted, social dominance. And I want you to look like you've never been happier. And what do I get out of this? Besides the date. Protection, Julian said simply. Nobody touches what belongs to a Vane. Not even Liam Thorne. You'll go from the girl who got pranked to the girl who is untouchable. I looked toward the main building. Through the glass doors, I could see Liam pacing the hallway, his friends looking on with uneasy expressions. He looked agitated. He looked obsessed. I looked back at Julian. He was offering me a deal with the devil. But the devil had better manners and a much sharper suit. Friday night, I said, my voice steadying. But I'm not just a prop, Julian. If we do this, we do it right. No one can know it's a setup. Elara, he murmured, a slow, wicked grin spreading across his face. I'm a Vane. We don't do anything halfway. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, sliding it toward me. Put your number in. My driver will pick you up at 7. And wear the blue dress. I paused, my thumb hovering over the screen. How do you know I have a blue dress? Julian pushed off the tree, already walking away toward his next class. He didn't look back as he threw a hand up in a wave. I notice things, Elara. That's why I'm better at this than he is. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of terror and triumph. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from an unknown number. Liam, are you insane? Stay away from Vane. We need to talk. I deleted the message without replying. The Ice Queen hadn't melted. She had just frozen over. The atmosphere at St. Jude's Academy had shifted overnight. Usually, the hallway chatter was a dull hum of gossip and exam stress. But today, it was a pressurized chamber. Every time I turned a corner, the whispering stopped. Every time I opened my locker, I felt the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes. I wasn't the pranked girl anymore. I was the girl who had somehow tamed the storm. I was heading to the library to hide among the stacks of sociology texts when a hand slammed against the locker next to my head. We're not done, Elara. Liam, his golden boy facade was cracking. His hair, usually perfectly swept back, was slightly disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept, or like he'd spent the night punching a wall. We were done the moment you started laughing with your friends. Liam, I said, not looking up from my bag. Move. I'm going to be late for my lecture. You're using him, Liam hissed, leaning in close. You think you're being clever? Julian Vane doesn't do dates. He collects leverage. He's using you to get to me because he knows I care about my reputation. I finally looked at him, letting a slow, cold smile spread across my face. Your reputation, is that what you're worried about? Because from where I'm standing, you look like the guy who got dumped for his superior. Liam's jaw tightened so hard I heard it click. He's a sociopath, Elara. He doesn't feel anything. You're a toy to him. And what was I to you? A punchline. I stepped around him, my shoulder brushing his. At least Julian is honest about being a shark. You're just a bottom feeder pretending to be a lifeguard. I walked away, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm. I felt empowered, but the bravado was a thin veil. I needed to see Julian. I needed to know the next move. I found him in the back of the library, in a secluded alcove he practically owned. He was hunched over a heavy leather-bound book, a pair of silver-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He looked devastatingly academic. Liam is unraveling, I whispered, sliding into the chair opposite him. Julian didn't look up, but the corner of his mouth quirked. He's cornered. A cornered animal is either pathetic or dangerous. Currently, he's both. He told me you're using me. Julian finally looked over the rims of his glasses. His gaze was unreadable, a vast gray sea. I told you that myself yesterday. Did you forget? I didn't. But he's desperate, Julian. He's going to try something. Julian closed his book with a soft thud. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his intertwined fingers. Let him try. In fact, let's give him a reason to spiral. The spring formal is 48 hours away. Tonight, there's a pre-party at the lake house. Everyone will be there, including Liam. You want to go? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. The lake house parties were legendary and volatile. I want us to arrive together, Julian corrected. I want him to see you in my car. I want him to see me touch the small of your back. I want him to realize that his prank was the best thing that ever happened to you. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His skin was cool, his touch steadying. Are you ready to play the part, Elara? Or are you still holding on to the ghost of the boy who laughed at you? I looked down at our joined hands. The girl I was a week ago would have run, but that girl died in the hallway. I'm ready, I said. What's the dress code for a lake house execution? Julian's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Something he'll regret losing. The air at the Miller's Lake house was thick with the scent of pine, expensive cologne, and the electric hum of bass vibrating through the floorboards. This wasn't just a party, it was a social battlefield. I sat in the passenger seat of Julian's sleek, matte black sedan, staring at the glowing windows of the timber-frame mansion. My heart was a frantic metronome. I was wearing a silk slip dress the color of midnight, paired with an oversized leather jacket Julian had tossed over my shoulders for the chill. Breathe, Elara, Julian said, his voice a low vibration in the quiet car. He didn't look nervous. He looked like he was about to checkmate a king. You look like a diamond. He's going to feel the pressure. What if he makes a scene? I whispered. Julian turned toward me, his gray eyes catching the moonlight. He reached over, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw with a lingering heat that made my breath hitch. Let him. The more he screams, the more he looks like the loser. Ready? He didn't wait for an answer. He stepped out and walked around to my side, opening the door with a grace that felt entirely too practiced. As we stepped onto the gravel path, he slid his hand firmly around my waist, pulling me flush against his side. The moment we walked through the double oak doors, the party hit a snag. The music didn't stop, but the volume of the conversation plummeted. Liam was by the fireplace, a red plastic cup in his hand, surrounded by the usual sycophants. The second he saw us, his grip tightened so hard on the cup that cider sloshed over his knuckles. Julian, Liam called out, his voice tight and forced. Didn't think this was your scene. Or yours, Elara. Thought you'd be home, studying. Julian didn't even break stride. He guided me toward the bar, leaning down to whisper something in my ear that made me laugh, a genuine, breathless sound that had nothing to do with the script and everything to do with the way his lips brushed my temple. We thought we'd stop by, Julian said, finally acknowledging Liam with a bored glance. Elara wanted some fresh air before the formal. though the air in here seems a bit stale. Liam stepped forward, his face flushed. You're pathetic, Vane. We all know what this is. You're just trying to piss me off using my leftovers. The word leftovers felt like a slap. I flinched, but Julian's hand on my waist tightened, a silent command to stay still. Julian's expression didn't change, but the air around him turned arctic. He took a slow step toward Liam, leaving me by the bar. The height difference wasn't much, but Julian seemed to tower over him. Careful, Thorne, Julian murmured, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. You're talking about my date. And unlike you, I actually know how to value something rare when I find it. She's a joke. Liam yelled, the cider finally spilling as he gestured wildly. Ask anyone. It was a bet. I won. Did you? Julian asked, tilting his head. Because you're standing there covered in cheap juice, yelling at a girl who won't even look at you, while she's leaving with me. Doesn't feel like winning to me. It feels like a tantrum. Liam lunged. It was clumsy, fueled by ego and alcohol. Julian didn't even flinch. He simply caught Liam's wrist mid-air with a sickeningly fast reflex, twisting it just enough to force Liam to his knees. Don't, Julian whispered, leaning down to Liam's level. You already lost the girl. Don't lose your dignity, too. Julian let go, and Liam slumped back, panting, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Julian turned back to me, his face smoothing into that unreadable mask again. He offered his hand. I think we've had enough fresh air, don't you? I took his hand, my fingers trembling. As we walked out, I glanced back one last time. Liam was staring at us, but he wasn't yelling anymore. He looked broken. But behind the break, there was something else. A flicker of something truly dark. Once we were back in the car, the silence was heavy. I looked at Julian's profile in the dim light of the dashboard. You didn't have to do that, I said. He called you a leftover, Julian replied, his voice flat. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Nobody says that. Not while I'm standing there. Julian. I reached out, touching his arm. Is this still just about the rivalry? He didn't answer for a long time. The engine hummed, and the trees blurred past as we sped away from the lake. The formal is tomorrow, Elara, he said finally, ignoring my question. Sleep well. You're going to need your strength for the finale. The spring formal was held in the St. Jude's ballroom, a space of vaulted ceilings and crystal chandeliers that usually felt like a sanctuary. Tonight, it felt like an arena. I stood before the full-length mirror in my room, smoothing down the skirts of the dress. It was midnight blue, the color Julian had noticed, with a neckline that felt daring and a slit that revealed just enough to be dangerous. I didn't look like the girl who spent her weekends buried in library basements. I looked like someone who could start a fire and walk away without a scratch. A heavy knock sounded at my door. When I opened it, Julian was standing there in a charcoal gray tuxedo. No tie, just a crisp white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, looking like he just stepped off a yacht in the Mediterranean. He didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. His gaze traveled from my heels to my eyes, and for the first time, the Ice King looked like he was struggling to breathe. The blue dress, he murmured, his voice a low rasp. I was right. It's a weapon. Are you ready for the final act? I asked, reaching for my clutch. Julian stepped into the room, closing the distance between us. He reached out, not for my hand this time, but for the back of my neck. His skin was warm, his thumb grazing the sensitive spot behind my ear. The thing about final acts, Elara, is that someone always gets burned. Make sure it isn't you. The arrival at the formal was supposed to be our victory lap. When the valet opened the car door and Julian stepped out to offer me his hand, the flashbulbs of the student photographers felt like small explosions. We entered the ballroom, and the sea of silk and lace parted. Liam was there, of course. He was wearing a gold tie, fitting for his fallen king status, and standing by the punch bowl with a girl I didn't recognize. But his eyes never left us. They were bloodshot, tracking our every move with a frantic, jagged energy. He's going to snap, I whispered as Julian led me onto the dance floor. Let him, Julian replied. He pulled me into the frame of a waltz, his hand firm on the small of my back. The higher he climbs, the harder the fall. The music was a slow, sweeping instrumental. For a few minutes, I forgot about the prank. I forgot about the rivalry. I only felt the rhythm of Julian's heartbeat against my palm and the way he looked at me, not as a pawn, but as if I were the only person in the room who mattered. Then, the music cut out. The silence was sudden and violent. All eyes turned toward the DJ booth, where Liam was standing, a microphone in his hand. He looked manic, a crooked grin plastered on his face. "Hey, everyone. Sorry to interrupt the romance." Liam's voice boomed over the speakers, dripping with sarcasm. "I just thought since we're celebrating true love tonight, I'd share a little secret about our school's newest power couple." My stomach dropped. Julian's hand tightened on mine, his eyes narrowing into lethal slits. "See, Elara here thought she was moving up in the world," Liam continued, pacing the stage. "But what she doesn't know is that Julian Vane didn't ask her out because he likes her. He asked her out because of a contract." Liam held up a folded piece of paper. My heart stopped. "Julian's father is trying to buy out Elara's family's land for a new development," Liam sneered. "Julian was just tasked with keeping the Ice Queen distracted so she wouldn't convince her parents to sign with a rival firm. It wasn't a prank, Elara. It was a business transaction." The ballroom erupted in whispers. The shame I felt in the hallway a week ago was nothing compared to this. I looked at Julian, searching for the lie in his eyes. But Julian wasn't looking at Liam. He was looking at me, and for the first time, his face was a mask of pure, unadulterated guilt. "Elara," he started, his voice barely a whisper. "I can explain." I didn't wait. I didn't cry. I just turned and ran, the silk of my midnight dress rustling like the sound of a heart breaking for the second time in a week. I burst through the terrace doors into the cold night air, the laughter of the ballroom following me like a ghost. I had traded a prank for a conspiracy. I hadn't been a supernova. I'd been a target. "Elara, wait." It was Julian. I heard his heavy footsteps on the stone. I spun around, my breath hitching in the frost. Was any of it real? The library? The lake house? The way you looked at me 5 minutes ago? Julian stopped a few feet away, the moonlight making him look like a statue. The contract was real. At first. But Elara, I haven't looked at that paper in weeks. "You used me just like he did," I spat, the cold finally reaching my bones. "You're not his rival, Julian. You're exactly the same." "I'm not," he said, stepping into the light. His eyes were burning. "Because he let you go. And I'm going to burn everything my father owns before I let you walk away." The silence of the terrace was sharper than the cold. I looked at Julian, the boy who had promised me protection while holding the very blade that cut me. Behind him, the ballroom was a hive of golden light and venomous rumors. But out here, there were only the two of us and the truth. "Burn it all." I let out a hollow, jagged laugh. "You are vain, Julian. You don't burn things. You acquire them. You manage them. You're just doing damage control." "It's not damage control," he said, taking a step closer. His shadow stretched long across the stone, devouring mine. "My father's firm wanted the land. They saw a student with a connection to the owners and told me to facilitate the deal. I took the assignment because it was a game. Because I thought everyone had a price." He stopped just inches away. I could feel the heat radiating off him, a stark contrast to the winter air. "And then you stood up to Thorne," he whispered. "You didn't ask for money or status. You asked for a way to look him in the eye without flinching." I realized then that I didn't want the land, Elara. I wanted the girl who was brave enough to use the devil to fight a bully. "So you lied by omission," I countered, my voice trembling. "You let me believe I was finally standing on my own 2 feet while you were pulling the strings from underneath." "I was selfish," he admitted, and the words sounded like a confession of a mortal sin. "I knew if I told you, you'd walk away, and I couldn't let that happen." A sudden crash from the ballroom doors made us both jump. Liam stepped out, his tie undone, looking like a man who had won a war but lost his mind. He was clutching a bottle of expensive champagne by the neck like a club. "Still talking." Liam sneered, his gait unsteady. "I thought you'd be halfway home by now, Elara." Or did he offer you a better percentage on the commission? Julian shifted, moving instinctively to place himself between me and Liam. Go home, Liam. You've had your moment. You've humiliated everyone. Are you happy now? Happy? Liam's face contorted. I lost my spot at the top of the list because of you. I lost the Ice Queen because you decided to play Prince Charming. I'm not happy, Vane. I'm just getting started. Liam lunged, not at Julian, but at me. Everything happened in a blur of charcoal wool and breaking glass. Julian didn't punch him. He simply caught Liam's shoulder and shoved him back with a terrifying, controlled force. Liam stumbled, the champagne bottle shattering against the stone balustrade. Stay away from, Julian growled. It wasn't the voice of a student or businessman. It was the voice of something much older and far more dangerous. Liam looked at the jagged glass in his hand, then at the look in Julian's eyes. The realization finally sank in. Julian Vane wasn't playing a game anymore. The rivalry was dead. This was something personal. Liam dropped the glass, his shoulders slumping. He looked small. Without the crowd, without the prank, he was just a boy who had tried to play with fire and ended up with third-degree burns. He turned and stumbled back into the ballroom, disappearing into the sea of people who would surely turn on him by morning. I looked at Julian. He was breathing hard, his knuckles grazed from the scuffle. Is right about one thing, I said softly. I'm leaving. Julian turned, his eyes searching mine. Elara. I'm going to my parents' house, I interrupted. And I'm going to tell them exactly who your father is. I'm going to tell them to take the rival offer. Not because I hate you, but because I'm done being the prize in someone else's contest. I started toward the stairs that led to the parking lot. Wait, Julian called out. I stopped but didn't turn around. The offer, he said. The rival firm. It's a shell company, Elara. My father set it up to drive the price down. If you sign with them, you'll lose everything. I finally turned back. Then what am I supposed to do? Trust you. Julian reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a sleek, silver pen and a crumpled piece of paper, the actual contract. Before I could speak, he tore it down the middle. Then again, and again. He let the pieces flutter into the wind like white moths. I'll give you the names of the real firms, he said. The ones who will actually protect your family's legacy. I'll give you the leverage to ruin my father's deal. It'll cost me my inheritance. It'll cost me everything he's promised me since I was born. I stared at the paper scraps on the floor. Why would you do that? Julian walked up to me, his face illuminated by the moonlight. He reached out, his hand hovering near my cheek before he pulled it back, as if he no longer had the right to touch me. Because I'd rather be a nobody with a clean conscience than the king of St. Jude's without you. The fallout was swift and surgical. Within 48 hours, the golden era of St. Jude's Academy had collapsed. Liam Thorne didn't show up for Monday morning classes. Rumor had it his parents had whisked him away to a military academy upstate to avoid the scandal of his public meltdown. The IT crowd, once his loyal subjects, had scattered like dry leaves in a storm, looking for a new center of gravity. But I wasn't looking to lead them. I was busy sitting in my father's study, watching the look of shock on his face as I laid out the truth about the Vane Corporation. They were going to trap us in a shell contract, my father asked, his face pale as he looked at the list of legitimate firms Julian had sent me. Yes, I said, my voice steady. But we have the leverage now. We signed with the Environmental Trust. They'll preserve the land, and they'll pay twice what the Vanes offered. My father looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. How did you find this out, Elara? A friend, I said. A friend who lost a lot to give me that list. I didn't see Julian for a week. He had been suspended for the fight on the terrace, though everyone knew the suspension was a formality, a way for his father to punish him behind closed doors. When he finally returned, he wasn't driving the matte black sedan. He arrived in a taxi, wearing a simple black hoodie instead of his usual tailored blazers. The Eclipse had been stripped of his shadow. I found him in our spot in the library, the alcove in the back. He wasn't reading. He was just staring out the window at the rain. I heard your father cut you off, I said, sliding into the chair opposite him. Julian turned. He looked tired. There was a faint bruise still lingering along his jaw, but his eyes were clearer than I'd ever seen them. He didn't just cut me off. He disowned me. Apparently, betraying the family legacy is the one thing he won't forgive. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be." Julian leaned forward, a ghost of his old smirk playing on his lips. I've spent 18 years being a piece on his chessboard. Being a nobody is surprisingly liberating. I even had to learn how to use a laundromat yesterday. It was humbling. I felt a genuine laugh bubble up in my chest. The great Julian Vane, defeated by a dry-as sheet. It was a close call, he admitted. He reached across the table, his hand stopping halfway, waiting for my permission. I moved my hand forward, letting our fingers touch. This time, there was no contract between us. No prank. No revenge. "The school is different now," I said. "People are actually talking to each other, without looking over their shoulders to see if Liam is watching." "And you?" Julian asked, his gaze intense. "Are you still the Ice Queen?" "I think I've retired," I said. "I'd rather just be Elara, the girl who knows how to spot a shark, but also knows when one is worth saving." Julian squeezed my hand, his thumb grazing my knuckles. "I don't have a car. I don't have a trust fund. And I'm pretty sure my father is going to try to get me blacklisted from every Ivy League school on the coast." I smiled, pulling a small notebook out of my bag. "Well, it's a good thing I've been working on a new study plan. I hear the state university has an incredible law program. If we start now, we can probably get you a scholarship." Julian laughed, a low, warm sound that filled the alcove. "A study plan? You're a merciless woman, Elara." "You have no idea," I teased. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the remnants of the old St. Jude's. The prank was over. The rivalry was dead. But as Julian looked at me, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't playing a part. The punchline had been the beginning of the story. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below.